Good evening, and I hope you're all fine. Let's continue our topic on cohesion. The other day I talked about grammatical cohesion as an aspect of language that improves textuality. I discussed cohesion in terms of reference, ellipsis, and substitution, and I mentioned that these aspects of language enable us to use language effectively, and that is at the service of effective communication. This aspect of language can be useful for helping students with their writing. It can help them learn how to make their texts hang together in a way that helps them create texts that have both unity of texture and unity of structure. This is especially important for English writing, which is writer responsible, as opposed to languages like Japanese, which is reader responsible, where written texts are sometimes described as reader responsible. That is, a lot of things is left unsaid for the readers to work out what is meant. Like Persian. Persian is or seems to be more reader responsible than writer responsible. We take a lot of things for granted because we believe that this is already within the consciousness of the reader and it needs no further description. In other words, in English, it is the writer's responsibility to make sense of the text and to make it clear to the reader. So they describe each and every aspect which they find important, aspects which to me as a Persian native speaker might appear as redundant. So the use of cohesion patterns is one way in which a writer can do this. Thornberry, 2005, argues that teachers need to move from sentence-based to text-based teaching to help students achieve their real-world communicative goals. Language is not in its natural state in isolated sentences. Language always occurs in texts, in discourse. An understanding of discourse grammar can help reveal the ways in which language works to create our sense of text and our sense of connected discourse. Many textbooks focus on conjunction in the teaching of students' academic writing. Well, fewer focus on other aspects of textual cohesion. While coherence is as much an issue that involves a reader as the writer, Coherence is very hard to achieve if the text does not have cohesion. Another aspect of cohesion is vocabulary cohesion, which is textuality is partly achieved structure that we use connect to one another. Sometimes you use synonymous expressions, sometimes you use antonymous expressions, sometimes you use words that are hierarchical. Well, unfortunately, there is a problem with my internet. I guess the internet today is tremendously low. Do you have my voice now? So, bringing a discourse into a discourse dimension into language teaching does not imply an abandonment of teaching or teaching vocabulary. Vocabulary will still be the largest single element in tackling a new problem for the learner. Vocabulary is still regarded as the cornerstone of our teaching. The vocabulary lesson will still have a place in a discourse-oriented syllabus. The challenge is to bring the discourse dimension into vocabulary teaching alongside traditional and recent approaches to the teaching of language. In teaching vocabulary, we need to look at context and co-text. By co-text, I mean the words surrounding a word in focus. And by context, I mean, all the information that is available to us, including linguistic and non-linguistic. The relations between vocabulary items in text described by Halliday and Hassan are of two principal kinds: reiteration and collocation. That is, cohesion is achieved either through reiteration or collocation. Well, it is debatable whether collocation properly belongs to lexical cohesion, because collocation only refers to the probability that lexical items will co-occur, and it's not a semantic relation between words. Like I say, day and night, bread and butter, or hi, how are you? Fine, thanks. So lexical cohesion refers to reiteration or repetition of words and creating textuality, the property of a text which distinguishes it from a random sequence of unconnected sentences, unconnected words. So, if lexical reiteration can be shown to be a significant feature of textuality, then there may be something for the language teacher to exploit. We can give learners meaningful, controlled practice and the hope of improving their text creating and decoding abilities, providing them with more varied contexts for using and practicing vocabulary. Reiteration means restating an item in a larger part of the discourse by direct repetition or by exploiting lexical relations. By lexical relations, I mean hyponymy, synonymy, antonymy, word repetition, and stuff like that. Now, take this example. There was a fine old rocking chair that his father used to sit in, desk where he wrote letters, a nest of stone tables, and a dark imposing bookcase. Now all this furniture was to be sold, and with it his own past. Well, it is important to make learners aware that synonyms are not just ways of understanding new words when they appear in class, when they crop up in our teaching, but they are there to be used just as any other linguistic device in the creation of natural discourse. Well, notice that in my example, rocking chair, desk, tables, bookcase, furniture, all belong to, well, one family, the family of furniture. Furniture, well, found at home. So rocking chair and desk are different, but they belong to the furniture. Desk and tables are functionally different, but still they are related to one another. Bookcase, again, well, differs from rocking chair, desk, and tables, but still you might imagine a room in which you have a desk, I don't know, bookcase, a chair, on the other side a table, and all these well regarded as as furniture that are found in a house. Well, one implication for language teaching is that those who simplify texts should remember that disturbing the lexical patterns of text may lead to unnaturalness and inauthenticity at the discourse level. Simplification may mean an unnatural amount of repetition. At least I know in some classes, language teachers provide students with a list of synonymous expressions. They ask students to memorize those words as words that synonymously are related, and they do not describe the differences. We should remember that synonymous words are not always interchangeable. That is, if you use a word in one context, you cannot necessarily use a synonymous expression exactly in that context, in the same context. So words that are synonymous are not in free variation, and they might be used in totally different contexts, even though their meanings are very similar, very connected. So, if our students learn to substitute one word for another word simply because those two words are synonymous, they might ignore a very important aspect of language. They might wrongly use synonymous expressions for one another, and this means that their communication would be badly affected. Their communication would be damaged, would be seriously impaired. And so, in one context, they mean one thing. Because they do not use these words appropriately, well, they might be interpreted as another. So take this example. Britain's green and pleasant meadows yesterday became killing fields with the start of the fox cub hunting season. More than 6,000 young foxes enjoying their first flash of life will be hunted down in the next 3 months to give inexperienced young hounds a bloodlust. But the dogs will also suffer. Anti-hunt campaigners estimate that 7,500 young hounds will be destroyed because they failed to make the grade, and many experienced hounds will be killed because they are too old to hunt. The cub hunting season is just a curtain raiser to the traditional pastime of killing adult foxes. Notice the words that have been underlined: killing fields, fox cub, young foxes, hunted down, dogs, young hounds, destroyed, hounds, killed, hunt, cub, hunting, adult foxes. All these words are related to one another. And the relations achieved through these words improves cohesion. This is what is related to killed, hunted down, next line, killed in the next few lines, and young hounds, cub, hunt, kill, foxes, dogs, horses. All these indicate that these words relate to one another, and so this relationship between words improves cohesion in discourse. So back to what I said. Words, synonyms might be 100% interchangeable only in one context. In another context, those words that seem to be synonymous might in fact turn out to be antonymous and opposite, because context affect the use of those words. So if you feel that these two words are synonymous words and they can be used interchangeably, you might be wrong, because in another context those two words might be interpreted quite differently. So they are considered as opposite or antonymous. Let me show you an example. So take this text. The depressing feature of Allen's document is the picture which emerges of smart but stupid military planners, the equivalent of America's MAGA fundamentalists, happily playing the fool with the future of the planet. Take the two highlighted expressions, smart. The words seem to be simple, known. And then if somebody asks you what is smart, you might say smart is the opposite of stupid. What is stupid? Stupid is the opposite of smart. But if you take this simple brief text, which emerges of a smart but stupid military planners, well, something that might at first surprise you. How come somebody or these military planners can be smart and at the same time stupid? Which emerges of a smart but stupid. Despite the conceptual meaning, sometimes our expectations of how words are conventionally used are disturbed. And here our expectations are disturbed. You can't imagine how these military planners be smart but at the same time stupid, because the smart and stupid are antonyms in our language, well, in English, in the language. And so it seems to us that the two attributes are incompatible. Well, one cannot be smart at the same time stupid. But these words are to be interpreted as compatible descriptions of the military experts. The point is that we have to adjust our typical expectations of how the two words operate as a related pair. Our reasonable interpretation would be that the experts are clever, but morally reckless. Clever, but morally reckless. So clever, smart, morally reckless, stupid. Right? To interpret. If I say, well, smart means intelligent and stupid means unintelligent, that would be nonsense. Right? Because, well, these planners cannot be at the same time intelligent and unintelligent. But if I say they are clever, but they are morally reckless, that would be interpretable. There are other less obvious kinds of lexical readjustments. There are lexical relations that are valid in one particular text only, and whose interpretations may not correspond to dictionary definitions. The reader or listener has to decide when those words are more or less synonymous or functionally equivalent. And when those same words are, well, used in a way that focus on the differences on meaning potential. Discourse-specific lexical relations are called instantial relations. These lexical relations frequently occur in written and spoken texts, and probably this is a universal feature in all languages. That is, relations between words cannot be seen as outside context. Relation between smart and stupid outside context might be interpreted as opposites. Relations between furniture and desk outside context, well, might be interpreted as no relations. It is only within context wherein relations between can be found. The problem with language learning, with language learners, is that they approach text with the expectation that words have rather fixed relationships. So these two words are synonyms. These two words are antonyms. These two words are hyponyms. These two words are not related, as if words have fixed relationships with one another, because they have correspondingly rather fixed meanings. In dictionary, we see words as having fixed meanings. This is not true in text. This is not true in context. The task of the language teacher is to raise an awareness of the vocabulary relations and assist learners in interpreting such renderings, such reorderings. Take another example. The accountants can produce as many figures as they like to prove that there are financial reasons for closing it, but there are no economic reasons. Actually, the campaign to keep the line has inspired many new initiatives along its length. Take the underlying expressions financial, economic. Again, if you are asked what is financial, you say economic. What is economic? Economic means financial. Again, we tend to use them interchangeably because outside context we believe the two words are synonymous. However, this relationship might not hold when it comes to the practice of language in context. In context, the two words might not be intersubstitutable. Financial relates to money. Economic also relates to money. If you see these words as relating to money, then you tend to interpret them as interchangeable. So where I use financial, I can also use economic. Where I use economic, I can also use financial. But this is an intuitive interpretation, because this is not always true. In this example that you see, financial and economic cannot be interchanged. They are different. What is the difference? There are financial reasons for closing it, for closing the company. Well, financial reasons for closing it because, probably they cannot pay salaries to their employees. So employees would lose jobs, right? There are financial reasons because, well, they cannot pay. So the company well has financial problems and they cannot pay their employees their salaries. But there are no economic reasons. Well, no economic reasons because, well, if these employees lose jobs, so there might be some social conflicts, social protests, social problems, right? So economic reasons here, well, has to do with the consequences of not the company not being able to, well, pay the salaries, and so well, social problems, social uproars might occur. Register is also closely tied to lexical selection. Among the signals of the problem element, uh, take words like problem, drawback, snag, issue, cog, even a word like albatross. Uh, all these have the same meaning. Problem, well, drawback is also a problem, snag is a problem, cog is a problem, albatross is a problem, right? But can I use drawback everywhere instead of problem? Can I use cog everywhere instead of drawback? Definitely not. Clearly, find a word like snag occurring in a formal scientific report. In a formal scientific report, I might go for problem or drawback. Or in a formal context, I might not use a word like come up with as a signpost for response or develop. Come up with is considered to be well, an informal expression that is used in less formal situations. Therefore, the relation between vocabulary and register needs to be brought out when studying textual signals. We should give our students an awareness of the different registers of language use. That drawback and problem and snag and issue, well, are synonymous, but they belong to different registers of language use. Right? So if I'm going to use these words, I should know about the context, I should know about the register in which that language is used, I should know about the well, assumptions about the audience, I should know about the style. There are, well, lots of issues to take into account before I decide which word I should use. Well, that is for cohesion. Let me now turn to another aspect of language relations, another aspect of language that has to do with meaning potential, and that is coherence. Let me just well, close this. Just give me a break before my PowerPoint is available. Right, so let me now turn to discourse analysis. In the study of cohesion, we said certain linguistic elements or text-forming devices distinguish coherent from non-coherent discourse. This is an illusion because the existence of textual relations does not necessarily improve cohesion. They improve the text. Text-forming devices or cohesive devices improve cohesion, but this is not necessarily so. Take these examples. I'm going to take my car out. My car keys are on TV. I'm running out of petrol. There is a garage round the corner. How are you? Nothing. Well, take the first example. I'm going to take my car out, and the second person says, my car keys are on the TV. Notice that the first person says a statement, uses a statement as if he is reporting something. But B takes it as a request. And she says, my car keys are on the TV. Well, indirectly telling him that if you're going to take your car out, you might take my car keys which are there on the TV. Take my car out so that you can take your car out. Probably her hands are full and she cannot move her car out. Imagine two cars parked, well, one after another. They are not beside one another, but they are in a line, one after another. So if you're going to take your car out, first you have to come take my car keys, take my car out, so you can take your own car. I'm running out of petrol. There is a garage round the corner. Imagine, you're driving along a road and you run out of petrol. And then you find another car who's driving on the opposite direction. So you ask him to stop, and then you ask him, you're telling him that you're running out of petrol. And then as he wants to be helpful, he says, there is a garage around the corner, right? Well, in a garage, they usually do not sell petrol. They repair cars. But if you're driving along a road, in a deserted area, for instance, in the garage they might also sell petrol. How are you? Novel. Novel. Well, no stands for not. V stands for very. EL stands for well. So novel is the abbreviation for not very well. Notice that in these three brief examples, there are no cohesive devices. There are no cohesive ties. But still, well, these conversations are fully understandable, fully coherent, and fully cohesive. Take another example. Hello, John. I bought a present for you. Oh, have you? You shouldn't have bothered. Wait a minute. Here it is. Thank you. Again, in this example, there are no cohesive relations. There are no structural words, no lexical expressions to show relations between terms. But still, terms are quite meaningful and related to one another. Take another example. At least 65 people died in a series of attacks in Iraq. Israeli troops shot dead 3 Palestinian resistance fighters in raids on Thursday. But Rosalia proudly presents the dress she had been preparing for the Great West Indian Carnival. Notice that those examples, the first 4 examples, are considered as quite cohesive and coherent. But this example is not considered as coherent. Why? Because it's hard to find any connection between the first sentence and the second sentence, between the second sentence and the third sentence. But still, notice that there is a word like but, which is a cohesive element. But this expression but does not improve cohesion between the second and the third sentences. In fact, it does nothing to help us find any meaningful connection between, well, the statements, the sentences. So the text might be cohesive, but it might not be coherent. Cohesion is necessary, but cohesion is not sufficient for coherent discourse. It is the case that we can conceive a context in which those 4 examples take place, but this example, well, it's hard to imagine a context in which I can find this text to occur. So coherence is achieved when a meaningful context is created, and the function of every utterance, each utterance, is identified. I cannot see how the function of the first sentence in this last example and the function of the second sentence in the same example and the function of the third sentence, right, how they relate to one another. In the first sentence, it talks about what happened in Iraq. In the second sentence, it talks about Israelis killing 3 Palestinian fighters. And in the third sentence, it talks about, well, Rosalia presenting, her dress. I cannot imagine a context in which these 3 sentences are put in one or the same context. Take this example. This box contains on average 100 large plain paper clips. Applied linguistics is therefore not the same as linguistics. The tea's as hot as it could be. This is William Worm. Just sent 12 Guinness cool token bottle tops. Again, the same problem. If I see each statement in isolation, each statement is fine. But put together, well, I would be perplexed. I would be confused by the way that these sentences will go together, because I cannot conjure up a context in which these sentences all appear in one and the same context. So we are left with two problems. Why have teachers and the students of language concentrated exclusively on production of correct sentences, if that is not enough? We see that in the examples that I put forth, we see that, well, correct sentences is not enough. I mean, production of correct sentences is not enough. More important is how these correct sentences are connected to one another. If rules are producing correct sentences are not enough for us to be meaningful, then what is it that makes our sentences meaningful? The grammar does not stop with a full sentence, but grammar reaches over it. Just as there are rules that limit what words follow, there. Well, if I see a word like there, then I know that after there should be a noun. Perhaps there are also rules which limit what kind of sentences can follow another. So cohesion is only a guide to coherence. Coherence is something that is created by the reader in the act of reading a text. Coherence is the feeling that a text hangs together, that a text makes sense, that a text is not just a set of jumbled sentences. Take this example. Claire loves potato. She was born in Ireland. Well, Claire loves potato. She was born in Ireland. The two sentences seem to be well, unrelated, and there are no cohesive ties. In fact, these two sentences hang together. They are only relevant and coherent if you already share the stereotypic ethnic association between being Irish and loving potato. Being Irish and loving potato. So if you're born in Ireland, well, you love potato. In Iran, we believe that those people who come from Kerman, well, Kerman is a city in the east of Iran, and in Kerman they grow caraway. So if you go to Kerman and you take caraway as souvenir to your friends or relatives, you have done nothing to them, in fact, because they grow caraway there in Kerman. So taking caraway to Kerman is doing something in vain. So to me as an Iranian, I know there is a connection between Kerman and caraway. If I hear caraway, well, I can imagine caraway in Kerman. But I don't say caraway in Ahvaz or caraway in Mashhad. This feeling is not created in me. So there is a connection. But if I say, for instance, if I say Abadan, well, it conjures up in my mind a feeling that, well, Abadan is hot. In Abadan you can find, well, good date palm, dates. That is created in me. Same happens to you in Basra, for instance. So as I said, coherence is achieved only when a meaningful and the function of every sentence is identified. Meaning. Sentences can perform different functions. If I say the window is open, the window is open. Well, this might be said by different people in different contexts. It might be said by a husband to a wife. If that is said by a husband to a wife, it might function as an expression of worry, concern. If I said by a teacher to a student, it might be an order to close the window. If it is said by a person like Sherlock Holmes, well, at the scene of a murder, it might function as an interpretation that the murder happened through the window. Well, take another example. Are you all right? And the girl says, no, we're all left. Well, at first sight, it might appear as irrelevant. Are you all right? No, we're all left. Well, it might appear that the two sentences, the two utterances are not connected. But a little bit of knowledge about the context and the relations between the people, the man and the girl, and the scales would fall from your eyes, and you would realize the relations between people. In fact, those girls were coming out, passing by, and he was going to tease them, tease the girls. So he said, are you all right? Still, well, they were aware of their soundings. So well, teasing manner, one of the girls responded with a language that was more teasing. So if you're going to tease me, I know that you're going to tease me. I know also how to tease you. Edmondson brings another example, 1981. Edmondson explores the issue of coherent from non-coherent texts. And he says context can help in creating coherence. And he gives the example of, well, the example that you see here. We'll have gas for lunch. Calderon was a great writer. We'll have gas for lunch. Calderon was a great writer. Again, B seems to be irrelevant to A. At first sight, it appears as B is irrelevant. I can find no causal relationship, no causal link between the first and the second utterances. But if I know about the context in which this occurs, then it would be meaningful to me. Well, if you know that this appeared in the context of Spain, so they are talking about some Spanish people. Calderon was a great writer. Calderon died 100 years ago. You might not know. You might not know them. These bits of knowledge, these bits of information, because you're not Spanish and you might not know about Spanish literature. So you might know that Calderon was a great writer who died some 100 years ago. And if you are students of Spanish literature, and if you know that today it is the day when Calderon died 100 years ago, and you're going to have gas for lunch on this occasion. So you might decide to invite Professor Wilson, because you know Professor Wilson is your professor who teaches you the writings by Calderon. So when you're gonna have gas for lunch, and then B says Calderon was a great writer, then you might say, oh, good heavens, I had forgotten. I should not have forgotten this, or this occasion should not have passed unnoticed. So Calderon was a great Spanish writer. I shall invite Professor Wilson to my party, to my lunch as well. So this way you find connections between B and A. Any native speaker will immediately establish the coherence between the two sentences. In fact, the provision of an appropriate context requires a reasonable level of ingenuity. Widowson claims that coherence is achieved through the perception of the functions performed by each utterance. So if you as a reader or as a listener perceive the function. This perception improves your coherence. This perception enables you to work out the links. This enables the emotional content of each utterance is supplied by the listener. That is, all the meaning is available to you. But the question is the propositional meaning available to me before the function of each utterance? Because there is the meaning, there is also the function. Which one comes first? This is an issue. Some people might believe that meaning comes first, then function. Still others might believe that the function of each utterance is in the mind of the speaker before the meaning is available. This is in fact not important. This is like asking about chicken and egg phenomenon. Which one came first, chicken or egg? In fact, well, personally, I do not know which one came first, chicken or egg. But I know that one is necessary for the existence of another. This is also true about meaning and function. It's not important which one comes first. As a reader, I should have available to me the meanings of words, but besides the meanings of words, I should also know about the functions served through those words. We might have sentences that are perfectly grammatical. We can point to messages, linguistic messages, which are not presented in sentences, and consequently cannot be described in terms of syntactic well-formedness, but still you find them quite interpretable. So you might have complete sentences but meaningless. You might have incomplete utterances but quite meaningful. Although there may be no formal linguistic links connecting these linguistic strings that you see, the fact of their contiguity leads us to interpret them as connected. We can readily fill in any connections which are required. So take example 7, peace in peril, warns of us, which is like a newspaper headline. Or take another example, 250 square meter building area, 3-bedroom spacious sitting room, outdoor jacuzzi, phone number. This is, an advertisement for renting a house or for selling a house, right? Again, they seem to be isolated, but you find connections between them. And so, on some assumptions, you consider them as quite coherent. So the reader interprets 7 as a newspaper headline, and the third one and the eighth one as an advertisement. In fact, to arrive at an interpretation, what makes a listener or a reader arrive at an interpretation is that the reader relies on his intentions, his intention to arrive at the speaker's intended meaning. So you rely on a number of principles of analogy, lexical, local interpretation. By local interpretation, we mean the interpretation that is closest to us. General features of context, knowledge beyond discourse, shared knowledge, sociocultural knowledge. We rely on these principles to arrive at the total meaning. In interpreting conversational discourse, one area is turn-taking. There are also regularities in the ordering of the turns described. So when I say hello, you say hello, or you say hi. When I say how are you, you say fine. Notice that you don't say fine. So turns are ordered. Well, to interpret the text as coherent, you rely on your knowledge of the world. What do we mean by knowledge of the world? General knowledge about the world underpins our interpretation, not only of discourse, but of virtually any aspect of our experience. Knowing what's going on in a text is a special case of what's going on in the world at all. Understanding discourse is based on our past experiences. My past experience tells me that the mat is by the door. I don't say the door is by the mat. They are the same, but we say one. We do not say the other. Well, top-down, bottom-up processing. Well, top-down, bottom-up processing, well, this is a metaphor for the way we process discourse, for the from computational modeling of language. Well, in order to understand language, well, you have to work out the meanings of words and structures. But this is not enough. The meanings of words and structures is not enough. This has to be added to the contextual meaning. So the meanings of words, the dictionary meanings of words, or the compositional meanings, plus the contextual meaning, plus our experiences. Text-based factors and by text-based factors I mean meaning in text, in the word, plus inside the head factors. And by inside the head factors I mean, well, my experiences, my knowledge of context around me, surrounding me. Well, take this example, which is which has to do with well, Hong Kongers or two well, schoolers in Hong Kong. They are talking about well, something that is shared. First, well, one of them is afraid of disclosing it, talking about it, but he finds courage to express it, and he realizes that the other person also, well, is like him and, well, has the same knowledge. So they soon begin to understand each other very well. A number of studies have been carried out in psychological and computational approaches to discourse analysis to account for the predictions that writers and speakers make or assume a listener or reader has whenever a particular situation is described. For example, a speaker should not, well, if you go to a restaurant, for instance, well, well, the waiter should not describe to you that there are tables and chairs in the restaurant, that there are, I don't know, spoons and forks on the table. And if you're going to talk about, well, your experience of going to a restaurant to one of your friends, you do not have to describe them, right? You don't have to tell them, well, there were chairs in the restaurant. We dragged the chairs and then we, well, sat, well, at the table. We sat, well, around the table, and then, well, there were spoons and there were waiters. Well, you take them as, well, as something that is intuitive information. This is part of the default knowledge. Right? So default elements are assumed to be present, even though they are not those bits of knowledge are not established. Well, this is knowledge frame presentation of knowledge about the world. A process of fitting what one is told into the framework established by what one already knows. Frames are mental structures that shape the way that we use language. These frames are triggered by the words that we use. Script deals with event sequences. It proposes conceptual dependency. Scripts are action stereotypes for people's knowledge of routine activities, like going to a restaurant, as I said. So those events that happen to me when I go to a restaurant, those events that occur to me when I go to restaurant, and what conjures up in my mind? What do I imagine? What happens in my mind when I describe going to a restaurant? Closely related to this is scenario. Notice that all these indicate how information is registered in the brain. Registration of information may be described in terms of frames, frameworks, data structures. Registration of information may be described in terms of scripts or scenarios, scripts or sequences of events. Registration of information may be described in terms of schemata or metaphorical constructs or cognitive structures. So schemata, in fact, are metaphorical constructs that describe the organization of information in memory. They are cognitive constructs. Schemata are said to be higher level, complex knowledge structures. Schemata are said to be ideational scaffolding. And by ideational scaffolding, we mean how knowledge is scaffolded, how knowledge is categorized in the brain. And how this categorization enables me to interpret the experiences, interpret utterances. How this organization of information in my brain enables me to interpret the incoming utterances based on my experiences. So these are all mental models describing the organization of information. Right, that's all for this session. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening. I have recorded this session, so if you had internet connection problems, you might get back to it and listen to my presentation. Have a nice evening. Bye.